A gorilla-like wild man and a chimeric beast competed for headlines as they terrorized southern New Jersey in the summer of 1927. Today on American Strangeness, Bigfoot versus the Jersey Devil. For centuries, residents of southern New Jersey were accustomed to periodic visits from the abominable Jersey Devil. It often appears during August, wrote the Atlantic City Daily Press during that very sweltering month in the summer of 1927. It has cloven hooves, a long tail, and, eyewitnesses claim, it makes an uncanny noise as it leaps over the pumpkin vines. But that year, another monster arrived to steal headlines away from Mother Leeds' little boy. A tall and hairy, Bigfoot-like wild man who had a strange proclivity for snatching and defacing vehicle tires. Gloucester County may have its Jersey Devil, but Salem County has its own wild man of the woods, wrote the Camden Evening Courier on August 27th. The wild man, said to be a big, tall brute, hairy but otherwise unclad, is being sought by numerous searching parties throughout this section. Residents in the vicinity of Quinton and Sharptown are especially active, inasmuch as he has been reported in both sections more often than anywhere else. According to the breathless tales of those who say they have seen this mysterious individual, he is said to be ferocious of countenance but very shy. They say he has the speed of an antelope and, with just one exception accredited to him, has done nothing to prove he's a wild man. The one exception involved Thomas Smith, a 15-year-old boy who lived on Quinton Road. Smith was riding his bicycle about 2 miles north of Salem when he spotted someone peering out at him from the woods. Suddenly, what Smith described as a big, hairy man without any clothes jumped out from the trees, slashed the tires of his bicycle, and then chased the boy along a cornfield. Smith escaped back home to his father, and they reported the incident to Sheriff J. Emmer Robinson. The sheriff launched a manhunt at once, accompanied by several local officers, a group of state troopers, and about 25 citizens. The posse scoured the woods and fields, searching for a long-haired, bearded individual who they suspected might have escaped from a lunatic asylum. But the elusive wild man left nary a trace, no footprints nor any other clues. However, 4 men, frightened and breathless, dashed into the farmhouse of Edward Jones near Sharptown and told him they had seen the wild man near a deserted schoolhouse. Jones and another farmer, Cooper Wilson, followed the men back and also encountered the wild man. He fled and the men gave chase, but the wild man's speed was so great that he easily eluded them. The group returned and summoned Chief of Police Floyd Pennell of Woodstown and Walter Crispin, undersheriff. But despite scouring the area, the lawmen failed to locate the wild man. Jones and Wilson described the wild man as a Borneo specimen, a reference to the orangutan, which was also referred to during this era as a wild man of the woods. For a time, old residents of the area were inclined to regard the wild man as just that old Jersey Devil poking its nose around again. But as furor over this new and different antagonist grew, the Atlantic City Daily Press was prompt to express its disdain over any comparison to the beloved Leeds Devil. A short time ago, we were bold enough to write that we believed unqualifiedly in August freaks, but that was before the alleged appearance of a wild man of the woods on the outskirts of Salem, New Jersey, the Daily Press indignantly wrote on August 29th. We rise quickly to say that we are willing to believe in any other kind of freak, but in a South Jersey wild man, never. We trust that all other good Jersey men will join us. Too long have we placed our faith in the regular seasonal appearance of the strange dun-coated hybrid, the Jersey Devil, to allow ourselves to be carried away by Salem's flimsy makeshift, which is entirely too human and runs every time one looks at it. In past decades, the famed Jersey Devil had traditionally appeared in winter, leaving hoof-like marks in the snow. The rivalry was on. On August 28th, The wild man defied his earlier daylight appearances in Salem's woodlands and swamps with a nocturnal visit to one of the city's cemeteries. One Salem man glimpsed him skulking in and out amongst the tombstones. It was a drizzly and dark night, and the witness was unable to discern if the wild man wore any clothing, as he told authorities. An investigation at the graveyard failed to reveal any trace of the visitor. Near midnight on August 30th, a taxi driver parked his vehicle at the Halfway House gas station, midway between Salem and Bridgeton, filled up the tank, and headed inside the station to pay. When he stepped back outside, he saw the passengers in the back of his cab peering out the windows like something had startled them. Gazing from one side of the cab to the other, the driver was able to distinguish an indistinct form on the far side. Hastily moving around in front of the taxi, he was just in time to see a figure turn and slink away into the darkness. Despite only getting a glimpse, the driver described the man as being more than 6 feet tall and weighing more than 200 pounds. The wild man retreated into the woods near the gasoline station, waving his arms and emitting guttural sounds. As the taxicab departed and rolled slowly down the highway, the occupants could hear the man moving rapidly within the trees, crashing through the underbrush and against branches. He must have had good eyesight, said the driver, for he seemed to stay up despite the things in his way. The taxi driver and passengers watched for the wild man to come out of the trees into the roadway again, but instead heard his movements grow less and less distinct as he headed deeper into the woods. Authorities were notified, and a hunt was again started for the elusive wild man, who they suspected was living like an animal in the woods. The next sighting of the wild man happened in Shirley, don't call me Shirley, about 6 miles from the gas station at 10 p.m. on September 4th. George Masknell, a farmer from Shirley, finished weighing his truck on the local scales and parked several yards away in the semi-darkness. He awaited the arrival of his neighbor in another truck carrying tomatoes, so the two could head together to the nearby cannery. With a longer wait than expected, Masknell dozed off, only to awaken with a start when he heard a basket of tomatoes crash from his truck to the roadway. Peering out from the cab, he saw the basket on the ground with 2 or 3 of the tomatoes spilled out. Unable to account for it being there, he watched it for several minutes. Just as Masknell was preparing to get down from the cab to replace the basket on the truck, a long, hairy arm reached out from the rear, snatched up the container, hoisted it under its left arm, and bounded off down the road. Dazed at the sight, Masknell was unable to tell whether the man wore clothes or not, but the farmer was impressed by the thief's size and strength, evident by the ease with which he carried away the heavy basket of tomatoes. When he had collected himself, Masknell hurriedly summoned several residents in the vicinity. They tracked the man, following his huge footprints some distance up the road to a cornfield, where the trail was lost. In any case, it's good to see the wild man appreciated the state's greatly renowned Jersey tomatoes. The Camden Morning Post recounted the wild man's next adventure on September 10th. Salem's gorilla man steals automobile tire. Pennsylvania motorist leaves jack and flat shoe on road and drives away in fright on rim. Never good for your car. Salem, September 9th. Does Salem County's wild man own an automobile? If not, why should he steal an automobile rim and tire? These questions are puzzling those who have seen the gorilla man appear on the Salem-Bridgeton Road and other lonely places throughout the county. A Pennsylvania motorist reports the loss of a spare tire from the front of his automobile as he was preparing to change a flat this morning at 3 o'clock. A gorilla-like man or animal grabbed the tire and rim under his arm and sped off into the darkness. The Pennsylvanian, too frightened at the appearance of the visitor to give chase, hastily climbed into his machine, left his jack on the road, and hurried into Salem on the rim. The automobilist told his story to several taxi drivers in Salem on his arrival. He said that he had a blowout about 2 miles from the halfway house, midway between this city and Bridgeton. It was near this point that the wild man made an appearance 2 weeks ago. Stopping his machine along the road, the Pennsylvanian removed the spare tire from the rear and took it to the front of the car in order to place it on a front wheel. His wife and 2 children remained in their seats, partially asleep. As he jacked up the wheel, he felt the car rolling forward and backward. When he stood erect to place something under the tires to keep the car from shaking, he said he was startled by a pair of long, hairy arms pulling on the lamp. Almost as soon as he looked, he said, the man or animal realized that he was being watched. Hastily grabbing up the spare tire with an arm that seemed to reach almost to the ground, the thing turned and was off into the darkness before the man realized what was taking place. Not even hesitating long enough to gather up his jack and the flat tire, the motorist jumped into his machine and sped down the road. He failed to see any signs of his unwelcome visitor in the trip to Salem, 14 miles distant. Still showing signs of the fright, the motorist stopped only long enough here to tell his story to taximen at the courthouse and to inquire the shortest route to Philadelphia. During the past 3 weeks, several appearances of some strange wild creature have been reported as seen in 3 or 4 sections of the county. Except in the first case at Sharptown, those who report the cases are able to catch but a glimpse of him. All the descriptions have him as a huge, heavy man, probably more than 6 feet tall and weighing more than 200 pounds. At Sharptown, he was said to have lacked all clothing, while at other places it was impossible to distinguish in the darkness whether he was wearing anything or not. He moves rapidly, appears to have great strength, and so far has failed to say anything on being discovered. When that guy was changing his tire with his wife and his kids in the car, did anyone picture the scene from A Christmas Story? Oh, fudge. Only with Bigfoot? The perennial Jersey Devil was not about to be outshone by this hairy, tire and tomato thieving newcomer, and put in several appearances of its own in South Jersey during the summer of 1927. On August 4th, huckleberry pickers toiling in the cedar swamps a few miles from Swedesboro, near Bridgeport in Gloucester County, reported the appearance at a distance of a feathered quadruped about the size of a fox, with a cry that was half bark, half hoot. The berry pickers reported that they had startled the animal, which uttered angry hoots when they pursued it and showed such speed that it easily escaped them. Its feathers were compared to those of a chicken. This news excited the Shoot and Miss Gun Club. While some members began devising plans to capture the devil, Club President J. Franklin Ryder rejected the ideas and seemed more intent on hunting the beast. Members Mickey Groff and Al Sheets, both expert marksmen, announced their intent to spend one of their vacation days searching for the animal. On August 8th, the Woodbury Daily Times reported that one of the 1927 editions of the Jersey Devil had been spotted nearby in Paulsboro. The description of the animal, a dog-like shape with feathers, was exactly like the one spotted in the Cedar Swamp the previous week. Driven to action, Shoot and Miss Gun Club President Ryder and Secretary Pete Locke armed themselves and headed up a blackberry picking party, which sailed up the Raccoon Creek on the evening of August 9th aboard the SS Kangaroo. The pickers found a bounty of fruitful bushes in the wild, and soon all their buckets were filled with fine, large blackberries. Ryder and Locke kept a sharp lookout during the outing, a large double-barreled shotgun loaded with special shot at the ready. However, no trace of the Jersey Devil was seen. By August 25th, Sheets and Groff announced their intent to capture the beast and display it at the annual Firemen's Carnival the next week. They apparently did not succeed in this bold plan. On the evening of September 19th, John Mulady and his expert mechanic, while returning from Swedesboro, saw a strange object crouching alongside the road in the woods at the hollow near Charles Megan's farmhouse. As the car neared the object, it rose on its hind legs and appeared to be about 8 feet tall. When the car passed the creature, it attempted to jump onto the running board but was unsuccessful due to the automobile's quick acceleration. The Jersey Devil followed the car for a short distance but soon fell out of view as Mulady put the pedal to the metal. Thereafter, Ryder ordered Locke to utilize the stone and concrete road while going to Swedesboro. As the roads were too high for good railbird shooting, though, the Shoot and Miss Gun Club planned to organize a search party to scour the woods in the vicinity of the hollow. Mulady, or Malady, touted by the Woodbury Daily Times as one of the living witnesses to see the Jersey Devil, was driven to capture the monster. By October 6th, he was busily engaged in perfecting his own trap to catch the slippery beast, assisted by Ryder. As there was no further news, we can assume that neither Milady nor the dedicated Shoot-and-Miss Gun Club ever succeeded in trapping or killing the legendary Jersey Devil. The Wild Man of the Woods is a legendary character that dates back to the late medieval period in Europe and appears to have been carried over by settlers who arrived in North America. However, the American Wild Man was many different things. Sometimes he was a hermit, often afflicted with mental illness, living outside society in the forest. Like his European counterpart, his solitude in nature often resulted in him regressing to a feral state, complete with the physiological change of growing hair all over his body and acting like an animal. But in a number of cases, the wild man was described as straddling the line between man and gorilla, especially after French-American zoologist Paul du Chaillu introduced the latter to the Western world in 1861. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, a number of wild men were described as being ape-like and close in appearance to the Bigfoot popular today, complete with a tall stature, a body covered in hair, and traits such as great strength and speed, aversion to humans, and the emittance of eerie noises like whistling. One of the strange traits of Salem's wild man is that none of the witnesses could decide if he wore clothes or not, although he was consistently described as hairy. This reflects a number of 19th century wild man reports in which witnesses could not determine if what they encountered was man or beast. Like a missing link, it was recognizable as being human-like, but displayed traits associated with other primates. Perhaps Salem's wild man was just a large, hairy human who had gone back to nature. But it is fun to imagine that fleeting sightings of an unknown hominid covered in a thin coat of fur might generate such confusion. Salem's boogeyman wasn't the only case of a wild man, especially of the more human type, in New Jersey during this period. On August 20th, 1927, just a week before the first appearance of the Salem wild man, the Millville Daily Republican in Cumberland County, which borders Salem County, reported the capture of a wild man by New York City police. This particular wild man, decidedly a human being, had been frightening female berry pickers in the vicinity of South River in north-central New Jersey for several weeks. City police contacted South River Chief of Police Charles Eberwein, who traveled to New York City with one of the berry pickers to try and identify the man, who was being held at Pier A, Marine Police Precinct 71. Wild men, and apparently Jersey Devil sightings, are often associated with berry picking, perhaps owing to the remote nature of the activity during the 19th and early 20th centuries. In October 1927, a possible wild man, described as tall with a heavy black beard and wearing a dirty shirt and trousers, appeared out of the woods which fringed the farms at Beasley's Point in the shore town of Ocean City, New Jersey. Women and children ran screaming to their homes, and when their husband and fathers would appear, the man scurried into the dense thickets, wrote the Camden Morning Post. Many sleepless vigils in strongly barred farmhouses ensued. On the afternoon of October 6th, Henry Clouding saw the strange man on his farm. State police at Tuckahoe were notified, and Trooper McGuire hastened to the scene, but the interloper had by then disappeared. A number of farmers organized a posse and followed Blackbeard's footprints into the woods. After proceeding several hundred yards, the trail was lost. On May 28, 1928, Woodbury Sheriff John B. Stratton and local police were hot on the trail of a wild man, said to have been seen in the Dickerson Woods at the southern end of the Gloucester County city during the previous few nights. Employees of the West Jersey and Seashore Railroad claimed they had seen a man running about in the woods, scantily clad and hiding behind trees. The railroad workers stated that the man was about 6 feet tall and had bushy hair and a long beard. They said that every time they looked into the woods at him, he would jump behind a tree. Shortly before noon on May 28th, Sheriff Stratton, Under Sheriff Tryon, Chief of Police McGee, and Policeman Hampton conducted a thorough search of the woods in that locality, but were unable to locate the wild man. They did, however, find numerous footprints. On November 18, 1928, Joseph Stout of Swedesboro reported to New Jersey State Police that he had seen 2 gaunt and unshaven wild men lurking in the high marsh grass between Pennsville and Penn's Grove in Salem County. What followed was what the Camden Morning Post called the strangest investigation within memory of local authorities. Police hoped it might be their first real lead in the search for two Delaware men, Wilbert Crows, 21, and Horace Walker, 17, who had disappeared on Election Day after setting off in a small boat for a duck hunting trip in the Jersey marshes. The young men had been given up for dead after their abandoned rowboat was found on the mudflats near Pennsville. Stout's report, coupled with ramshackle bungalows and extinguished campfires police discovered in the marshes, offered hope that Crows and Walker might still be alive, though having become, quote, lost and demented as they roamed the swamps. However, this promise dissolved when Walker's body was found on a Delaware River beach on November 22nd. His head and left arm were missing, which police suggested could have been due to contact with the propeller of a river steamer. On November 27th, Crow's corpse was discovered lodged in a jetty in the Delaware River. Authorities believed that the hunter's boat had overturned and they drowned. Whoever the two wild men were was never solved. Does anyone remember an early episode of The X-Files called The Jersey Devil? I recall being disappointed that the titular monster was not presented in the standard fashion of a winged, horse-like chimera, but rather as a people-eating, Neanderthal-esque relic hominid living in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. I never would have guessed that Chris Carter might have been onto something, presenting a monster of the week more akin to the Salem Wildman of 1927. Look, speaking as a New Jersey native, the devil is always going to come first, but there is plenty of room, even today, amongst the sprawling farmland and dense pine barrens of southern New Jersey for our very own wild man. So, the most pressing question, who do you think would win in a battle between Bigfoot and the Jersey Devil?